It's been a long time since we last met, so I'm happy to see all of you. Well, we have Santa here, awesome.
Yes, hi, Alex.
Thanks for joining this meeting. I would like to ask you if you have any questions, just type this in the chat, like in the chat section of the BlueJeans meeting. We will make sure we will answer all of them, and if you have anything to add, also feel free to do that. I would like to start with with one new that we finally created 2.4 branch, and we started 2.4 development. Right now, it will be the main branch in the Magenta repository, so we already switched all of the pull requests to this base branch, and we will accept all your contributions in the 2.4. If anything will be added to 2.3, it will be done by internal teams based on priorities made by our product owners. But again, our main focus right now is 2.4 development. We still finalizing our backlog, and as soon as it will be prepared, we will share the backlog for 2.4 with community and have separate meetings about that. So that's the major update that I wanted to share with you. Maybe you have some questions about 2.4, so that's the best time to ask about this. If no, you can again add to the chat, and we'll make sure we'll answer them. And I would like to ask Oleg to talk a little bit about community cloud projects and say a few words about this.
Hello guys, I'm Oleg from Cloud. Actually, this is our first Cloud and community Hangouts, and I hope it is not the last one. Magenta Cloud also have a bunch of different projects, and I actually want to talk a little bit about them today. Magenta Cloud is pretty big ecosystem, and the idea actually to go not above and beyond of the cloud itself, and to provide different developers, different system integrators ability to use our tools. In a nutshell, we have a cloud meta package which we deliver to all of our cloud customers. But essentially, the main important thing is our cloud tools, which actually deploys the Magento on the cloud infrastructure. And the idea actually is to make EC tools independent from Magenta Cloud. We want to give possibility every developer, every system integrator to use EC tools and deploy Magento on any cloud system. It can be Kubernetes, AWS, Azure, whatever you want. We also have cloud components. This is a pack of useful Magento extensions, which we also ship to our cloud customers. One of them is actually the warm-up of page cache, which we want to provide to our customers and give them possibility to make their user experience better for customers. Also, we have Cloud Docker, which is our most, I would say, the community engaged solution. So Cloud Docker is actually the Docker development dev box, which we ship together with cloud tools, but essentially we want also to go above of Magenta Cloud, and we want to make Cloud Docker available for any customer who use Magento, who want to test Magento on the Docker installation and so on. Also, we have cloud patches, which is a set of critical and security patches which we ship to cloud customers. They are not any related to the cloud, they are just related to the Magento, so everybody who uses Magento can use cloud patches. This is public repository. We keep it updated with the latest patches that our security team publish, and we actually also deliver some very important functionality there. And the new cloud tool we have Kubernetes DevBox. This is pretty grown solution, but we just got it in our possession, and we actually will develop it and continue investing in this project. A little bit about each tool itself. So EC Tools is the main development tool for deployment tool for the Magento. On the cloud infrastructure, it is public repository you can find in the Magento EC Tools repository. It is actually universal. We want to give ability to the customers to deploy Magento on any cloud infrastructure. It provides very rich environment and file configurations. It supports different login systems like Slack, Mail, whatever. It supports multiple versions of Magento. We support Magento from 2.1.4 till latest 2.3.3. So any customer who uses such version can use EC Tools to deploy Magento in different cloud solutions. We provide some different additional commands like database dump. We also actually include the different, but I would say the default flow for Magenta Cloud. But essentially, and I will talk a bit later about this, we actually go in to provide very custom deployment flows. We support this and we develop this, and actually we are investing a lot of effort in this solution. So that's what our EC Tools was previously. We supported only Magenta Commerce on the Magenta Cloud and actually with Amazon, AWS, or Microsoft Azure. But we switched our vision, and in current developed version of EC Tools, we support actually any of the cloud infrastructure. We provide different scenarios you can extend. We also provide the support for not only for Magenta Commerce, but also for Magenta Open Source. So if you have Magenta Open Source and some cloud hosting solution, you can also use EC Tools. And also we support actually big variety of different cloud hosting solutions. Next one is Cloud Docker. So Cloud Docker is the default development environment for cloud customers. It is also public repository which you can find in Magento organization. So Magenta Cloud Docker is actually consists of different services like PHP 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3. It supports Nginx. It also supports MariaDB versions 10.0 till 10.3. It supports different versions of Redis starting from 3.2 till the latest one. It supports also Elasticsearch for the catalog search, and it supports Varnish. It is a bit different from the cloud solution because in cloud we use Fastly, but Varnish is pretty similar solution. So we want also have same user experience locally. So there are most things that actually related to cloud, but we also want to make Cloud Docker independent from our cloud solution. We want to make Cloud Docker work for any Magento installation, even without the cloud. So it's very easy to install it. It's very fast and reliable. We support different different work modes like production. When you have good performance, I would say even best performance. And we also support developer mode with Mutations or Docker Sync to synchronize files between a local system and Docker. And also, of course, we support Xdebug and a lot of nice configurable things. It is also supported and developed by Magento, so if you have any questions, concerns, you can always raise issue tickets in the Cloud Docker repository, and we are glad to help. Next one is actually the easiest one, is Cloud Patches. This is a pretty generic repository. So we made it independent from EC Tools. You can install without any of Cloud components as just composer dependency. And we ship it with critical and security patches. We update it regularly, and actually it also works with Magento open source. And actually, last one, but not least one, is Kubernetes DevBox. So you can find this also in Magento organization. This project came us not so much time along, but we already started looking at this, and we want your support with this Magento to Kubernetes DevBox. Some useful links. So this is our 4 cloud repositories. They are all public, and all of them being actually monitored by our team. We are always ready to help with any questions and submitting your pull requests, whatever. And also we have 2 main channels. One is Cloud for general question about the Magenta Cloud, and the Cloud Docker for the Magenta Cloud Docker solution. Thank you.
We have several questions around that. So the first one, if in the future we will be able to host Magenta open source in cloud, AWS or Azure?
So for now we do not have such plans to host open source Magenta on the cloud. But definitely I can raise this question to the cloud product owners and give you more extended answer regarding this.
Okay. Another question is, which version of the Varnish are supported?
We support 2 Varnish versions. If I'm not wrong, it should be 4.0. I can actually very quickly check. So it is in Magenta Cloud Docker, images, and then you can find Varnish. So currently we support 4.0 and 6.2 version.
Mm-hmm. Does it include like a self-signed SSL certificates for testing and development?
We generate a self-certificate for every Docker image provision, and actually you will not have the green Chrome certificate, but SSL and HTTPS will be working locally fine.
And another question is, what do you mean by ECR Tools will support Magento open source?
So previously because Magenta Cloud does not support the open source solution of Magento, we didn't actually pay attention. But recently we changed our focus, and if I just will open the EC Tools project. So in latest version we added the different functional tests to ensure that our EC2 solution can build and deploy the Magento open source as the regular commerce. So you can see we have functional tests for Community Edition, which ensures that average to EC Tools does not break the support of open source.
Okay, and last question, like a self-signed certificate does not work with service workers, right? So you can test AWS solutions with this.
No, I don't think it should be possible because, and actually it's pretty tricky to generate the correct certificate with on Docker locally. We are currently looking at some kind of Let's Encrypt solution, but it has actually compatibility problems, and currently it's not supported. That's true.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So I think Igor will proceed with bundle extensions updates.
Sure. Hey guys. So some of you may know, some of you may not. Since I've departed the community engineering special projects team, I've been working on the VBE's repo and the marketplace team, kind of grabbed them all together and kept them close to my chest. So I'll be showing up at these community hangouts once in a while, talking about new and exciting stuff that's happening with Marketplace Repo or VBs. So for this inaugural appearance, let me share a third of an answer to a common question. How do we open issues or contribute to the vendor bundled extensions? So that's a very popular question, and I'm working pretty hard on giving you all public repositories with vendor bundle extensions to contribute to. Right now, we can start with sharing these public repositories for Amazon Payments and .mailer extensions. They're all available for you guys and open under Amazon and .mailer's Magento organizations. We'll share links in the chat box and after the meeting. Feel free to open issues and submit pull requests there. Folks from Amazon and Digital will be happy to accept your contributions. We're also working with the rest of the vendors who's a provider of vendor bundle extensions to open up their open source extensions, at least for contributions. It's pretty early to say anything, but I'm fairly certain that we're going to be opening up Yapo for issues and contributions from the community fairly soon. That's it. It's nothing as impressive as what Oleg showed, but still should be pretty important to you guys.
That's great. Thank you. I don't see any questions to you. That was pretty clear. Igor, could you please proceed with your...
Okay.
I think everyone is waiting for your updates regarding... Yeah.
Everyone is waiting for me constantly. Okay. So I'll try to share my screen right now real quick. Give me a second. So actually I don't know how my slot called in the agenda, but on my slides it's called the Storefront application. So let's talk real quick about the whole history and what the background of this activity we already have and what Magenta what Magenta have been doing on the Storefront application direct for almost a half of a year. And first of all, additional spoiler, it's worth to mention, and I'm mentioning this every time I'm talking to somebody from community about the Storefront, either Storefront application or GraphQL application, that we are not going to duplicate any API. So all the existing GraphQL coverage and endpoints are going to be preserved. So nothing to worry about. And if you heard somebody that the new approach or this approach is called the GraphQL 2.0, it's just a misleading marketing term, and it shouldn't be taken seriously. So this is not a semantic version; it's just kind of a joke, probably bad joke. So don't trust them. So the whole idea behind the segregation of the Storefront application and the store management application is that especially after the Adobe acquisition, we've noticed that most of the merchant, and actually Adobe brought to us quite a lot of really big merchant, and Magenta started to target upper market. So that most of those merchants already have some e-commerce ecosystem in place. So this merchant already have either ERP system or customer relationship system or inventory management system or some system for management logistic and so on and so forth. So this category of merchant usually consider Magenta as a fast storefront layer, as the first upper tier e-commerce application. And taking into account that currently, at the current stage, Magenta actually represents both storefront and the store management application, and especially taking into account that we have quite a high coupling between all of those applications, particularly on the level of code. So we are reusing the same service contracts, we are reusing the same models and services for both storefront and store management scenarios. For us, it's not that easy to just make this decoupling. While merchant, in fact, they are not really big merchants, in fact, they are not, or even mid-sized merchants, they are not, in fact, really interested in our store management application because they already have some system in place, as I already mentioned, and they are just interested in a storefront application. Yes, that's why actually our activity currently is to make this split happen, and to provide the possibility for those merchants who now need our store management part just not to use it and use their infrastructure instead. And probably most of you already seen this diagram, which was presented during the H2 of 2019 and most of the community events, including Magenta Live Europe and other events. So this actually the effective split of Magenta on two different applications. And when we say application, first of all, we mean the ability to be deployed independently, to be scaled independently, and so on and so forth. And this application actually consists of a set of microservices, and in particularly currently we are talking about the storefront. So the storefront application is supposed to be a headless application which consists of a set of microservices, and we have some requirements like none of the shopper requests coming either from PWA side or from experience management side should not, or none of the synchronous requests should go through the storefront application and be forwarded to store management application. So all the communication between the storefront and the store management should be done just in a synchronous and non-blocking way. And actually, the same is true for communication initiated by admin part. So if the data is sent from the admin part, it should be also done in async way. What it means? It means that if one of those applications for some reason will be out of service, for example, at the store management part will be out of service, it will still provide an ability for customers, for shoppers to place order on a storefront application. And one of the benefits of the system that we can get easily replaceable in particular our store management part. So here you can, for example, see how the Magenta order management suppose in the coming future to easily substitute our out-of-the-box inventory management part and order management part, and that would not introduce any disruption to the storefront, so that it would be the storefront would be absolutely agnostic to all the changes and all the substitution of components happening on the store management part. This actually one of the main idea. And this is pretty typical to the whole microservices world, so we are not inventing a wheel here, so we are pretty much following the industry standards and industry approaches here. And this is, and taking into account that we would have a split of the store management and the storefront part, we will have some component which will be communicate to one another in the scope of particular business domains. So, for example, for catalog storefront component, we'll have the counterpart component on the store management side, and this counterpart component will be our PIM, our small product information management system, which definitely would be really limited in its possibilities, but the main idea that it would be easily switched to some big product information management system. The same is true for checkout, which will communicate with the CPQ, the configure price quote system on the store management part. For customer, we have CRM. For orders, we have order management, and so on and so forth. This is actually the main idea, and here we are getting back again to one of the technical aspects that such segregation actually will help us to achieve the CQRS, and because we see that one of the proofs that we're supposed to have two different systems like storefront and store management instead of the one, because even from the business perspective we have different requirements, we have different read-write ratio for storefront and store management parts, we have different requirements for the scalability of these two applications, and we have different reasons to change for all of those. And actually, this just proves that our choice to make the split was right. And when we started this initiative, when we started this new project, which may be referred as a Storefront API or Storefront application, we from the very beginning we did not know how we will proceed further and what's going to be done. That's why but we knew for sure that it's going to be a multi-tier architecture, and we decided to build it layer by layer or tier by tier, and we started to build it because you might build a good API just if you know for sure how this API would be used by the clients. That's why we started to build our API from the client layer. That's why we started to work on the PWA Studio. But currently, I believe most of you are aware that we already have Adobe AM, which stands for Experience Management, and which also consumes our GraphQL API. So as soon as we started to build PWA Studio, most of you who follow Magenta knows that our initial version of the PWA application was relying of REST contracts. So that we've seen the limitation of REST, and in particularly that all the data are either retrieved as a whole or non-retrieved at all, and actually pretty much the same for persistent. To persist even one attribute for such complex entity as a product, we need to provide in our payload the whole entity, all the attributes, which introduce quite a lot of impact for both bandwidth, because we need to send all this data via wire, and along with that, it introduced quite a lot of performance degradation from the persistence standpoint. That's why. And also because of the versioning, because you know that first of all, because of the strict backward compatibility requirements in Magenta, we are not really able to introduce new versions of our REST API. That's why our REST API is actually versioning, so that you may see the version 1. So we have the V1 as a part of our path in the REST API, but actually we are not eligible to increment it, so that probably you will never see the V2 as a part of our REST API. That's why that was another choice. That was another reason for us to choose GraphQL as a API to be exposed for external clients, and in particularly to clients which are supposed to render the data. So because the GraphQL by its nature is versionless, and in our initial version of the GraphQL, we implemented our GraphQL resolvers actually use either existing Magenta service contracts or Magenta collections or resource models, but along with that, we still in that implementation inherited most of limitation of existing Magenta service contracts, which are pretty much all the RESTful based. What it means that most of our service contracts don't provide the possibility to partially persist or partially retrieve entities. So most of them are still, by their nature, are RESTful based, and we did not provide anything which supported the patch updates or patch retrieval of data and so on and so forth. That's why our implementation of the GraphQL endpoints, which we currently distribute as a part of, in the scope of our 2.3 release line, is still not. It's actually faster than RESTful-based web APIs, but still is not fast enough. It's not that fast as we would like to see it. That's why our next step was, and actually we did not share it with community, because we wanted to play around. We wanted to make some R&D changes. So one of the core teams was allocated for this activity, and in the scope of that activity, they actually introduced the performance efficient GraphQL resolvers, which were based on newly written data extractors, and these data extractors was not dependent on existing Magenta service layer, not to existing Magenta models, but instead it was pretty much usage of our framework resource model and actually making the plain SQL queries. So this is actually was the layer 3, which we are talking right now. But we actually got some prototypes. We got pretty good number regarding the performance, but at some point of time we realized that as a disadvantage of this approach, we actually losing quite a lot of already existing extensibility for the storefront. For Magenta service layer. Along with that, we're supposed to duplicate quite a lot of business logic on the level of these storefront APIs. And this is not really a sustainable solution, especially taking into account if you want to expand this approach to all the teams and all the parties involved into the new into the implementation of the new storefront APIs. That's why on the next slide, I will show you the approach which we discussed pretty recently, but we already agreed that this approach is supposed to be followed by all the parties involved, so by all the internal teams, and along with them, this approach should be followed by you, by community developers. And actually this approach helps us to efficiently decouple from the code perspective and from the data storage perspective the existing monolithical application, or let's call it better Magenta store management application, from the newly created storefront application. And in fact we will have here 3 different applications. So let me talk through the sequence of events happening on this diagram real quick. So as you can see, we have 2 different clients. We have first of all merchant and we have shopper. Merchant communicate to the store management application through the REST API, while shopper or customer communicates to the storefront application through the GraphQL. And here you can see 3 different applications on the center of this diagram, and these are all Magenta based application, but if you're talking about the store management application, we have both Magenta framework and Magenta modules. So this is pretty typical Magenta installation, which you used to see in your day-to-day work. And in the scope of this, in the scope of the work in the scope of processing business request, Magenta modules and Magenta service contracts expose some business events. These business events are caught via pluginization or via event observing mechanism, and we just publish this business event to some event bus, or we are just exposing we are calling some external webhook. And this is how we communicate with another application, which is connector application. So the connector application consumes the data passed from the Magenta store management application, and taking into account the asynchronous nature of this communication, we are not introducing any performance degradation for the store management app, because actually this is just either a webhook or just publish an event. This actually all. And on a connector application, the consumers, the main responsibility of consumer is to enrich data exposed in the scope of this business event. So for example, if we have the order place and we have the order ID, we might need to retrieve additional data. To refine this data, we're supposed to call web APIs, REST, which will go through REST to Magenta store management application. And if we are calling our business logic through the web APIs, actually what it means that all the existing extensibility points and customization which happen on this level are preserved. There is some delay in broadcasting of my screen, but I was trying to emphasize it with the help of the cursor. So in this case, Magenta Store Management application returns the enriched data, and this data now might be consumed by Storefront application. So that this data are published to event bus, and now this is how the communication between connector application and the Storefront application happen. So that consumer from the Storefront application gets this data from the event bus and actually make the persistent on storage. So actually following pretty much standard idea to the in the microservices world, we would like to make a decision, we'd like to make a choice based on each particular domain. So currently, actually, this diagram represents the catalog Storefront application, which is probably simpler than order placement and order application or the customer, because we have just a unidirectional data flow, and we have the catalog data just read only for customer or shopper. For customer and the order placement, it may be a little bit more complicated, but let's talk through it a little bit later. But now let's get back to our Storefront application. So the consumer on the Storefront application part retrieves the data from and actually it's triggered by the event in the event bus. It gets all the data from the event bus, and now it's responsible to store it in own storage, in own index. So currently for catalog data, we are considering Mongo, but we don't have a final decision yet, but that's why we have Elasticsearch and Mongo. With a high chance of probability, it's going to be MongoDB. And but for sure, we want to have some document data storage. So we want to store some non-relationship data there, which would be optimized for reading. And then we introduce additional layer for Storefront GET APIs. And actually, these storefront get APIs are those APIs which would be triggered by GraphQL request initiated by shopper. And regarding the storefront, it would be pretty similar, pretty simple. So this API will retrieve the data from the storage and return it back to the shopper. In our future, so currently in the scope of all the activities, so the storefront API, which is going to be added by both core teams along with by you guys, community contributors, it would be PHP interfaces. But our main goal here is to consider storefront API as not rather a PHP interface, but a payload, HTTP payload and output to make in future the decision and actually the whole the programming language, which is the store application, is based on just a matter of implementation and make it transparently for shopper and transparently for client like PWA and transparently for store management part to easily switch particular implementation of microservice, say from PHP to JavaScript, Node.js-based JavaScript application.
So Igor, we already got several questions in the chat. Maybe we just can briefly answer them and move on.
So just let me draw the bottom line, and we can get back to this question. So as you can see, the main idea here is that so one of the requirements to the storefront application is that these three applications are Magenta based, as I already mentioned, and we will be adding the new storefront API there. And as you may notice here, that connector application and the storefront application actually should not be dependent on none of the Magenta modules. So all the dependencies eligible in the scope of these two applications are just dependencies on Magenta framework. And that probably should be either validated through static test or validated on the level of repository boundaries. Yes, and we also need to avoid any business logic in our GraphQL resolvers. So there are just 3 rule of thumbs for a storefront application. So as you can see, it's easy as 1, 2, 3. So I don't think that introduced a lot of complexity for you. And now let's get back to questions.
Yeah, if you want, you can open the chat, or I can read it for you.
You can read.
Yeah. Okay. So the first one is if there are any numbers on speed difference between REST and GraphQL somewhere available.
I'm not sure whether we have some performance comparison, like official performance comparison. We had some non-official, but I would prevent referring them right now. But as to my memory, we don't have the official, or which we did, for example, on either medium or large Magento profiles.
Okay. So another question is about the store management and storefront will be 2 different backend services which can run on their independent machines.
Yes. So currently, in the scope of your work, which you are doing right now, and our core teams are doing, this is not really a story for the separate deployment. And if you will follow this link, I'm not sure whether it's open. I'm not sure whether I'm following it. So I'm not sharing the screen. But this is document which you may visit, either type in all this URL in your address bar, or if you scan the QR code. Actually, I'm not sure that anybody ever scanned the QR code to follow the link, but nevertheless, you have at least 2 opportunities to get to the right place. So the name of this document is a prerequisite for the split deployment. So actually, we are introducing here the two main prerequisites. The first of all, the code separation, and the second one is the data storage separation. As you may see, we have two different databases. So the next one, just to make it happen, we will also be working on own entry point for the storefront application. With a high chance of probability, it would be something stateful PHP application running on either Swooly, maybe Roadrunner, I don't know yet. Maybe it would be, for some domains, it might be Node.js, but we'll see. Yeah, but in any case, taking into account that these are three different applications, even now they may be deployed separately on different environments.
Okay, so thanks for that. And a few more questions. So what has been used for the event bus?
So for the event bus, so actually we have quite a lot of work happening right now, in particularly on the event bus track, and taking into account that our existing cloud infrastructure supports only RabbitMQ. So RabbitMQ will be the first adapter which we will add to the event bus. But along with that, it will be also Kafka. Almost sure it will be Kafka, and we consider Kafka currently for service-to-service communication. And along with that, it will be Adobe queue services like Adobe Pipeline.
Mm-hmm. And what about permissions? So on which level it should be handled?
And the second, it's related to this. Yeah. The second comment.
The second comment is when shopper initiates a query on mutation, and according to this architecture, it should be communicating only with storefront application.
No. So
storefront should be aware whether this customer is able to do this.
So regarding the mutation part, yes, we'll have some ACL logic on the storefront application as we have it right now, because we already have the segregation between the registered and authorized customer along with the guest. So that we already have the roles in place. And so I did not mention here regarding the scenarios, for example, either order placement or customer details update, which will happen for the customer domain, so that the particular mutation will be exposed by shopper. This mutation will lead to some data changes to the storage on the storefront application, and then that particular business event will be also exposed to the event bus, and we will have pretty much vice versa communication to connector and back to the store management application. Mm-hmm. And just a quick example, we already, those of you who have an experience working with Magenta order management, you already dealt with our MOM connector. And currently, taking into account that MOM connector is a part of the Magenta application, Magenta Store Management, we put quite a lot of business logic there. Actually, Magenta, even we had the thing that MOM connector started to expose own set of APIs, and this is introducing independent connector application. We want to prevent this from happening. We want that connector just refine data and maybe change it somehow.
And actually, there is a question about the data.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Can I? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
It looks to me that this question was mostly related to authorization and authentication. So, is your answer that it's going to be like a separate service for the user authorization that will be used, or it's going to be handled on each microservice level?
But we already, for our storefront application, we already have different roles, and we already have the process of authentication, so that we will preserve it. So we are not introducing the anything new from the business perspective here.
Yeah, and about the data. What kind of data does Magento Store Management with the MySQL storage have in comparison with Storefront application, which on this diagram represented the storage Elasticsearch or Mongo?
So in the case of catalog, because this diagram actually represents the catalog state, because so the work, at least I will see it that way. The work on any particular domain, we will start from drawing similar diagram. For example, the core team which currently about to start the work on the customer domain, actually they will draw pretty much the same diagram, but with in particularly with some details regarding the customer domain. So this is why we should not consider this diagram as applicable for every storefront application, but rather for example for catalog and actually the description of the paradigm which we would like to follow. So regarding the data, actually it's going to be the data which are requested by shopper, and probably for our first iteration, this data may be pretty much the same as the one which we already have for catalog search index, maybe. But this is a responsibility of team who is currently involved into this track to define the structure of the index and what particular data gonna be stored there. So I don't want to interfere with this process right now. So this is gonna be a decision made by a particular team who is involved into this process.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hey guys, so if you have any other questions, please feel free to drop them to the chat, and yeah, definitely will try to answer them. But yeah, Igor, you can proceed.
Probably that's pretty much all. Yeah. So.
I don't see any other questions in the chat, so.
In any case, if you're watching a recording of this Hangout, and if you'll get the question later on, just let us know through either Twitter or any of Slack channel. We have the APP Design Slack channel where you can approach either me or anyone from the architectural team, and we can discuss it in more details. So this is a concept which currently on a table, and looks like we are all agree on it, and we will proceed further with particular development in the scope of the domain and any particular storefront application we have.
Thank you. Okay, thanks guys for attending this meeting. So see you next time.
Okay. Thank you guys. Bye.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.